The story kind of starts with a plumbing story, actually. Let me get into my notes before I forget, but it actually, and being a plumber is of particular interest to me about a discovery that was made in 2004 in an Arab suburb of Jerusalem called Silwan. Some of you may already know where we're going with this, but there was a sewer leak. A big sewer main burst in the ground there. And being a plumber, you know, that speaks to me. When in Texas, if we have a sewer, you have to go repair. You first thing you do is you make sure there are no other utilities, right? You call 811 and they do line locates, make sure there's no gas line, sewer line, electric line, whatever else, water. You hope. They're not always accurate, but they come out and mark things, and then you start digging. Well, in Jerusalem, there's one more call you've got to make. You've got to do all that, make sure you're not going to cut utilities and things dangerous or expensive. And then you also have to call what's called the Israeli Antiquities Authority. And so in 2004, these guys called up the archaeologists from the Israeli Antiquities Authority and started digging to uncover this sewer line. So as they're there, the archaeologists are standing over the ditch. They've got to make sure everything's good. So they excavated and got down to the sewer line, and then you have to get a little bit below it to get around and be able to make a repair. So they dug down a little bit more and started to uncover some large flat stones. And then, of course, the archaeologists and the students jump in the ditch and started excavating carefully these large flat stones, and they uncovered a little more and a little more, and they found out that they were uncovering a large stairway that leads down into what they, over years, discovered was a large pool. And it was known now to be the first century, what remains of the first century pool of Siloam, or Shiloah, as they call it there. A very large pool. They also started to, excavate further around, and they discovered that there were steps in a paved area, a paved road, leading up to. Eventually, they surmised. Now they have not excavated every bit of it, but they're working on it still as we speak. But they've located that there's a walkway up the hill and to the north to the temple in Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount. It goes up to that southwest corner of the Temple Mount where an arched stairway known now as Robinson's Arch. It's not there anymore. It's been torn down long ago, and on that southwest corner of the Temple Mount where people would go and worship. And there today you can see there's the remains of where that arch had tied into the Temple Mount, and people would go up along that stairway and into the Temple Mount and worship at the temple. Down at the bottom, of course, is the pool of Siloam. And the road up to it is called now the Pilgrimage Road. Travelers would come into Jerusalem from all over the world. They would go, one of the first places that they would go before going to the temple is down to that pool at Siloam and wash. And then they would pilgrimage up that road. It's about 2,000 feet linear travel and about 400 feet of elevation. So those aren't terribly critical numbers to remember, but it's a good uphill climb down in that pool of Siloam is in what's now called the City of David. It was the old city of the Jebusite city of Jerusalem, one of the earliest settlements, and it's the pool that was made by King Hezekiah when they dug out and excavated the tunnel that is called Hezekiah's Tunnel now from the Gihon Springs through under the mountain, under the rock, and over to the pool of Siloam. So it's an interesting place where travelers can go. And then as they go up that pilgrimage road, there would have been shops on either side, tons and tons of people, especially during the feast days, just tons of people going up there. And they could buy clothes, buy food, buy animals for sacrifice. They could buy these things as they go up to the temple. The story today I want to talk about is is a story in John chapter 9. If you'll go to that area, and I may give a little bit of background here, but the story of a healing, a very famous healing, and in fact, John took the entire chapter, as we divide it, to talk about this healing of a blind man. Now, I'll give you a quick background. I don't want to spend too much time, but in John 8, Jesus began in the temple in that area, and he had a lot of conflict. John 8 goes through a lot of conflict with the authorities of that day, with the Jews, the scribes and Pharisees. It starts off with the woman caught in adultery, and he confronts them, and they all leave. But then it goes on and on. I do want to read, just for reference, in John 8:12, as they were speaking to him, because this is the whole chapter of 8 is conflict. It's confrontation between the authorities of that time and Jesus Christ. In John 8:12, he says, Jesus spoke to them, saying, "I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life." It's very appropriate that that Mr. Cartwright played the song, "This Little Light of Mine." It's interesting. But then you go on and through chapter 8, there's this discussion of slavery, where they claim we've never been slaves to any man. Jesus said, if you sin, you're a slave to sin. Then he talks about his father, spiritual fatherhood. His father, as they claim to be children of Abraham, he says, my father is God. So there's a lesson of spiritual fatherhood about who you follow. Who you follow is spiritually your father. And he's told them, you're children of the devil because you want to kill me. Abraham didn't do that. So there's more conflict. And then it goes on, and I want to keep it pretty short going through this, but in verse, let's go to verse 58 of chapter 8 of John 8. As Jesus said to them, "Most assuredly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." Before Abraham was, I am. He tells him who he is. I am. I think whenever he said these words in the Bible, when you read these, I always think that maybe it got a little louder and maybe things moved a little bit. I don't know, but I think there was something there. But then it says in verse 59, "Then they took up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple." So somewhere up on that Temple Mount, up in that area of the temple, he left, and going through the middle of them, he passed by. So he walked out and had to leave that temple area. And then we come to chapter 9 and begin the story of the interaction of Jesus Christ and this man born blind. It says, "As Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth." And so I imagine that this was up near that Temple Mount in the area known as Robinson's Arch, on that southwest corner of the temple, probably at the top end of this pilgrimage road, very likely. And it says his disciples asked him, saying, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered in verse 3, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him." He says, "I must work the works of him who sent me while it is the day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." This is powerful, but I want to go back now to getting way off my notes, but John 6:29. John 6:29. When he talks about this man was born blind so that the works of God might be revealed in him. The works of God. Jesus answered, and this is another conflict, but he says, this is the work. Or the people had asked, what shall we do that we may work the works of God? Jesus answered and said to them, "This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent." Now, I've had discussions and even done an entire message one time in our home congregation that believe that's a loaded word. It's not just a heart belief. It's not just a head. It's not a mental thing. But belief is an action word. Okay, I won't go into that today, but believe used in the biblical sense means that it comes out in your hands and in your feet. It comes out in what you do, and so it's more than just a mental belief or a confession. But he says that this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent. So back to John 9. Back to John 9, he says, this is the reason that the man was born blind, so that the works of God might be revealed in him. And I think what's interesting is when we think about this and we look, you kind of know the story of this man's healing and his receiving his sight. But as I study through this over and over again, this chapter in the story, I see the biggest miracle in this man's life was not the restoration of his physical sight. You know, that was quick. That was an instant when his sight was healed, was given back to him. The biggest miracle in this man's life was that spiritual sight that he received. And he, in this story, it seems like he receives it a little at a time. And it's through conflict. I hope we can bring that out as we go through this. There's conflict, there's difficulty, there's disagreement. But as he goes, there's a progression of his belief in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. So that, I think, is the biggest miracle in this man's life. I do want to go to a couple of other scriptures real quick while we're here talking about this light. And Jesus Christ said, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Of course, it makes you think almost immediately of John 1. And I'll just cover a couple of quick scriptures in John 1 because I don't want to dwell too long. But in John 1 and verse 4, well, let's read from the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. It's amazing, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But this is who was standing here speaking to this man born blind. It was the Word, who was God and was with God, and he's the light that came into this world, into this darkness. The darkness, it says, did not comprehend it. John 3:19, in the discussion with Nicodemus, in 3:16, God loved the world so much that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And he said, God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. And let me go ahead. Well, we'll read 18 and 19. It says, he who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe in him is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the condemnation. He said that the light has come into the world, and the men love the darkness rather than the light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone who practicing evil deeds hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. But he who does the truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be clearly seen, and that they have been done in God. Amazing. So let's go back to John 9, speaking about this man born blind, and we'll pick up the actual healing. Again, we could go to Isaiah 60. It says, arise and shine, your light has come. The prophecy is about the coming of Jesus Christ. I don't think I'll go there now, just for the sake of time. Make sure we've got time to cover the others. But in verse 6, he said, when he had said these things, he finishes speaking about himself. And when he said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with his saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with clay. And he said to him, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam," which is translated sent. The name of the pool is Sent. It's interesting because he sends this man, but he is speaking to the one sent into this world. And so you have all this, and he says, "Go to this pool of Siloam," which is translated Sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. This pool was a place of ritual washing because it had this living water, they would call it, from the Gihon Springs flowing through that tunnel of Hezekiah's tunnel. I've been through there, happy to have done it once. I won't go back again. It's a narrow, cramped place, but and for some reason, someone in front of us kept holding up the traffic, so it took about 3 times longer than it should have to go through. So, but it's an interesting place. But this living water coming in, and here he is talking to the true living water. Jesus Christ is the true living water and the light and the life of men. So this man went, and it's about, again, I said it's about a half mile down these steps that he had to go, of course, still blind, still with mud on his eyes, and he had to go in faith, right? He had to go in faith to walk down these steps and go to the pool and wash as Jesus had told him. And others were coming up as he went down, other people all around. You can imagine the crowds, but he moved, he went in faith. So in verse 8, he came back seeing, and then it says, "Therefore the neighbors and those who had previously seen that he was blind said, 'Is not this he who sat and begged?' And some said, 'This is he.' And others said, 'He's like him.' Then he said, 'No, I am he.' And therefore they said to him, 'How were your eyes opened?'" So this is step one, I think, of the man's spiritual eyes being opened. Because he starts out, he says, "A man named Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes. And he said to me, 'Go and wash in the pool of Siloam.' And so I went and washed and received sight." So the description of Jesus Christ, a man called Jesus. And we'll see his description of who he is changes as you go through this chapter. And I want to read on. "Then they said to him, 'Where is he?' And he said, 'I do not know.' They brought him who formerly was blind, to the Pharisees." So there's some conflict brewing already. "Now it was a Sabbath when Jesus had made the clay and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. He said, 'He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I see.' Therefore some of the Pharisees said, 'This man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath.'" Their understanding of the Sabbath and their rules of the Sabbath day, right? That he does not keep the Sabbath. And I've heard it said, I don't know if it's true, but the mixing of clay was one of the sins, and healing, of course, was another that they considered a sinful use of the Sabbath. Of course, we know that God's command in the Bible is to rest from our work on the Sabbath day. Rest from our work on the Sabbath day. It doesn't have details. It doesn't say you can't heal people. As Jesus said, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Anyway, he said, "He does not keep the Sabbath." And others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such things?" There was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, "What do you say about him? Because he opened your eyes." And he said, "He's a prophet." So I think that's a step above. He's a man named Jesus, right? There's a change, a little bit of change in his understanding through this conflict and questioning. Maybe a little bit of change. Maybe it's just written that way for our benefit. But he's a prophet is the next kind of step, next level. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been born blind. So they said, "Well, something must be up here. Something's wrong." And that he received his sight, until they called the parents of him who had received his sight. And in verse 18, just finished verse 18, if you're following along. But then they asked him, saying, "Is this your son?" So they called his parents to them and asked, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? Then he does, and how then does he now see?" Now this is, I've talked about conflict and adversity a few times, and in the face of conflict and adversity, there's kind of two choices we can all make, right? We can decide to face up to it, follow God's lead, or we can give up and back away. We can tune it out, just go back to the TV, whatever, just consume our time with all the distractions of this life, or we can face it and deal with it. And unfortunately, it appears the parents in this man's case kind of took the easy road. They kind of deferred and said, "We don't want anything to do with it. We're going back to our TV. We want an easy life. We want normal." And so they shrunk back. So his parents answered and said, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but by what means he now sees, we do not know, or who opened his eyes, we do not know. He is of age, ask him. He will speak for himself." So they deferred. They took that easier road. The pull of the flesh, we'll read about this in the sermon time, is strong. But they said, "No, we're not going to go for the conflict. We're not going to go for the fight. We're going to take the easy road." So they said, they already knew in verse 22, they said these things because they feared the Jews. So fear is a big motivator at times to do these things. They feared the Jews, and the Jews had already agreed that if anyone confessed that he was the Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. They didn't want to be ostracized from their community. Then his parents said, "He's of age, ask him." So they called again the man who was blind and said to him, "Give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner." This man, born blind, could have taken the easy route too. He could have said, "Whatever you say, okay. You're the authorities. I don't want trouble." But he didn't. He chose the opposite path from his parents. He answered and said, "Whether he's a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, though I was blind, now I see." We see the line, of course, from made famous 1,700 years later or so, John Newton, "I was blind, but now I see." This man did not cave in. He confronts him, and it gets more intense as he goes. Then they said again to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" And I love this. I'm a bit of a sarcastic person at times. It's something I'm trying to tone down at times, but I love his answer here. He said, "I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" That's amazing to me. That's powerful. Do you also want to become his disciples? He goes on to tell them, "We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this," I'm skipped. They reviled him. They reviled him and said, "You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we do not know where he's from." Then the man answered and said to them again, Why, this is a marvelous thing." He said, "That you do not know where he is from, yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him." Quoting scriptures to the supposed religious authorities, the ones who spent their whole lives studying the scriptures, but he's quoting scriptures to them, calling them out on their misuse of it. And he said in verse 32, "Since the world began, it's been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of the blind, of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." I can't read that without thinking about my good friend. I had a friend, he's passed away long ago, but Bert Mauldin I remember he had spoken one time about and I haven't been able to verify it since then, so I'm just going to have to use Bert as my authority. Sorry. But he talked about the Jews of the time of Jesus having had a kind of a checklist for Messiah. They wanted to be ready. They knew the prophecies were close that Messiah would come. And so they may have had, again, quoting only Bert is the best I can get, but a checklist for when Messiah comes, and that, many people can heal or raise up the dead, but when Messiah comes, only Messiah can raise up someone who's been dead for 3 days, right? Kind of a checklist. And then same thing, many prophets can heal a blind man, but only Messiah can heal one born blind. That he may have been referring to kind of a checklist like that, or maybe it was common knowledge or something that it would be a sign of the Messiah, and he's calling them out on this. This is what's happened. He said, since the world began, it's been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered and said to him, you are completely born in sins, and you're teaching us. And they cast him out. That's you see that so many times when you're out of arguments. You call names, name call, and what do they call it in debate? It's defer to authority or something like that. Just you just kick them out, get them out of your sight. When you're out of good arguments, they knew they were caught. But anyway, then let's read on. Jesus heard that they had cast him out. I think that he kind of maybe felt some camaraderie with this man at this point. He knew, he's like, that's a guy we can work with. That's a guy I can work with. He knew that they had cast him out, so he found him and said to him, do you believe in the Son of God? And this is another step in the man's spiritual eyes being opened, I think. He said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you. And then he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. Then his spiritual eyes were really open, right? You see that progression. He started off, this man called Jesus did this. And then they questioned him. He's a prophet. And questioned him again, calling him names, and he said he was sent by God. He was sent by God. Then they kick him out, and then he meets up with Jesus Christ again. And he fell down and worshiped him. In verse 39, Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may be made blind. You can go back to, we read with our kids through the whole Bible, and we've been reading through some of the prophets, and it's amazing how many references there are to this blindness God put because of Israel's sins. He talks in Isaiah, I'll make them stumble around like blind men so that they cannot understand. I've come into this world that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said, are we blind also? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains. That's kind of a scary thought as well for us who say we see. I think that our spiritual vision is something we've got to strive for all the time. We've got to work for, and we've got to ask for, and that it's an amazing story. And we see again that it comes out in conflict, comes out in through this conflict and through this adversity with the authorities of his day. Not that we seek the conflict, but if you follow God, Paul told Timothy that everyone who seeks to follow God will suffer persecution, will have persecution. I think that's in 2 Timothy 3. Let me turn there just because I want to make sure. We're almost done, sorry. 2 Timothy 3, and we remember and quote verse 16, but back a little bit, he's telling you why you need to have these scriptures that are inspired by God, profitable for doctrine and reproof. But he tells them bad times are going to come. Bad times are going to come. And he says in verse 12, yes, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. Evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. He said, but you must continue in the things which you have learned and been assured of, knowing from whom you have learned them, and that from childhood you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation. The Scriptures light up that light on life and give you that spiritual vision. Make you wise for salvation through faith which is in Christ Jesus. He says all Scripture is given by inspiration of God. It's profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped for every good work. It's amazing. When you think about Jesus Christ saying this man was blind that the work of God may be revealed. So there's a lesson in this man's life, I think, in this progression from he's a man called Jesus, 2, he's a prophet, 3, he was sent by God, he had to be sent by God, and 4, he is the Christ, the Son of God, and he fell down and worshiped. I think we can learn a lot from this and hope to get more into this concept of the spiritual sight and spiritual vision as we go into the sermon time later on. But that's, I think, we'll adjourn for now, near the end of our Bible study time, and then Mr. Cartwright, do you do the song first and then we'll pray, or what would you like?
Just do whatever you want.
Do whatever I want. Well, he's going to play one more song. I'm looking at the wrong paper now. Here it is. It is Well With My Soul by Philip Bliss. And then we'll pray one more time to adjourn the Bible study. Mr. Cartwright. If you'll bow your heads. Eternal God, we thank you again for the wonderful opportunity to be here today and enjoying the Sabbath together with our friends from Big Sandy and those joining online, and just ask your blessings and protection and comfort on all of us and all your believers all over the world, on our family back home, and just thank you for the examples you give us and the example of your Son. We're grateful for it all and ask your continued blessings on this day. We thank you and ask this in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.